Mark Carney's cabinet is in place. Now the Prime Minister and his core team get to work on the ambitious agenda he has set while navigating critical trade talks with an unpredictable U.S. president. Mélanie Joly was formerly the Minister of Foreign Affairs. She's now the Minister of Industry and the Minister responsible for Canada Economic Development for Quebec regions. Minister Joly, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, David. Happy to be here.
The Prime Minister talked about this cabinet reflects his mandate for change. There's still a lot of familiar faces, though, even if they are new jobs. How will Canadians see change from this cabinet?
I think what they're seeing from this Prime Minister is how much he's an economic Prime Minister. And he's the most economic Prime Minister in the last decades. We know because of his past experience, being the Governor of the Bank of Canada, of the Bank of England, being in the private sector. This is his passion. But it happens not only to be his passion, it's the number one priority of the country. And Canadians have been, they've been working hard. We know how much people have had issues paying for groceries. People want to take care of their kids. They want to take care of their parents. And they want a bit of a margin to be able to maneuver at the end of the month. And so affordability is a big issue. And overall, because of the trade war with the U.S., which I'm convinced you asked me questions about, a lot of people are either losing their jobs or anxious of losing it. And so that's why this change mandate we have is definitely to make sure that we are able to build big things.
There's a change in focus. He's obviously more of an economically focused Prime Minister. I think the Prime Minister Trudeau was, and that's not a criticism of the former Prime Minister. It's just where he is.
Exactly.
But there's also a cosmetic change and a personnel change here. And, there was a lot of talk leading up to this, the need to clearly demarcate the Carney cabinet from the Trudeau cabinet. Now, I know you were in both. But is that why there's 10 ministers out? Do you think that's why the change was so severe?
Listen, I can't talk for the Prime Minister, but what I know, though, is Prime Minister Carney is very results-oriented, very focused. He wants to empower his ministers. He wants us to have a lot of responsibilities. And, basically, we will be evaluated based on how much we're able to deal with crisis, because that's the reality of any portfolio, and also to be able to enact big change.
That was a clear message, though, from the Prime Minister today, that he will give you the authority to run your department, but hold you accountable for what you do.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't a message delivered in private, it was delivered in public.
Yeah. And that's how, that's my expectations dealing with the Prime Minister. I'm there to support him, and at the same time, I want to be able to have the right, freedom to be able ultimately to do my job. So, and I've seen it at Foreign Affairs, for example. You have to deal with the crisis of the day. In my case, it was the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, the tensions with China, with India, and then eventually the trade war with the U.S. But meanwhile, while doing that, you have to be able to deliver big pieces of policy. So, for example, an Indo-Pacific strategy, a vision of how you will have pragmatic diplomacy. And finally, the last thing was, the new foreign policy for the Arctic, so our Arctic foreign policy for Canada. So this was all done while dealing with a lot of crisis and the tensions that were also linked to all these conflicts at home. And so that's what I want to do in the context of my job. My job now is I'm moving from the diplomatic front of the trade war to the economic front. My job will be to help people that are targeted by this trade war. So obviously I'm thinking of people in the auto sector in Ontario. Obviously I'm thinking of all the steel workers and all the aluminum workers. So that will be my main focus. And I've seen, the causes of the conflict. I'm looking now at the effects of the conflict, and we'll be working on that and really fighting for people. And meanwhile, really thinking of how do we grow the economy? People around the world are asking themselves that. I've seen it in Europe, I've seen it in Asia, I've seen it in the US. The number one question is people's wallets and making sure that they have good jobs. So that will be my job now.
But on the issues you listed in the old job, the trade war, Arctic security and these things, some of those are moving into the operational phase from the policy phase, and those other issues are still unresolved. So you saw the Prime Minister take the questions about it, like why move your Foreign Affairs Minister in a moment like this? How do you view it, and how do you think Canadians should view this shift?
Well, I had numerous conversations with the Prime Minister, and I asked for this position. I wanted to come back home and go back to my roots. I'm a businesswoman before going into politics, and also I was the Minister of Economic Development, so I wanted to have a big economic portfolio again, and at the same time be able to be more in Canada. So I ran to become an MP in Hanse-Cartierville 10 years ago. And of course, I love foreign affairs, being the foreign affairs minister. I'll always have it very close to my heart. But I ran in politics to do big things. And right now, the number one issue, I think, for the country is the economy. And so I'll work on that.
Right. So the big things you have to deal with are the economic consequences of what Donald Trump is doing, the instability he's creating. Protecting the auto sector, obviously, is a key one, but also one of the policies of this government, going back to the deals done by Minister Champagne and others, were to help the auto sector evolve. We saw news from Honda today that it's delaying its plan to build out an EV supply chain in Canada by at least 2 years because of the uncertainty. What's your reaction to this news, and what does this and other things we're seeing in the sector say about the viability of those deals signed with Stellantis and Volkswagen and battery plants, because they look very doubtful?
And these are really important deals. So we need to make sure that we secure them. And there are different reasons why these deals need to be secured. And I'll be briefed on the file, so first. But within 24 hours, what I want to do is to be able to talk to Honda and to talk to the CEO, because I want to understand how we can be in solution mode. There are many things that we know we have to deal with, because the uncertainty is linked to the trade war. It is also linked to the change of policies in the US.
And lack of demand as well.
And lack of demand. So how do we work on that? And meanwhile, we know we have to make sure that we reach 2% of our GDP in defense. We know that this is a fantastic opportunity to give good jobs to people in the trade and people in the auto sector. How can we work on making sure that some of the lines that we're seeing in certain plants in the auto sector can also be working on defense and defense procurement? So, of course, I'll be working with the new Minister of Defense, David McGuinty, who's a dear friend of mine. Of course, I'll be working also with the Prime Minister on this issue. But you see how much there are different opportunities that are really linked to the government's actions, but you need a strong minister to be able to drive this.
So, but just on the other auto deals, like Honda's delaying it. They say they're not going to reduce workforce. They're going to keep making things at the Ellison plant, so that's not in jeopardy. But the Stellantis deal, the Volkswagen deal, those were contingent on the Inflation Reduction Act continuing, at least the subsidy end of it. And there's been some concern about whether
you mean
those...
in the U.S.?
Yes. The subsidies in Canada were tied to the continuum of the Biden policy, which Donald Trump doesn't like anything Joe Biden did. So I just wonder if you think those battery plants are still in the cards right now for Canada.
I still think that our goal is to be a energy superpower, and that will include clean tech, that will include critical minerals, and that will include battery supply chains. That's the reality. That's where the world is heading. Now, I know that there is uncertainty, but elsewhere in the world, these technologies are also being developed. And the EV transition is going to happen. The question is, at what pace? So let me take all the briefings, make sure that I have all the information, but I know that not only do I need to secure these deals, I need also to start a new form of diplomacy, which I haven't done yet. I was much more on the state-to-state diplomacy. Now it's basically state-to-business diplomacy, to talk to the CEOs of this world to make sure that Canada is able to get its fair share of international investment.
The idea, though, you just outlined, that if a 3-shift plant goes down to a 2-shift plant, is there a way to use that 3rd shift for defense capacity? I mean, are you talking about the workforce that would be displaced there, or the actual retooling of the facility? Because they get very specialized in the auto plants, right?
I won't go into the operations of the plants, and I know that people watching us, particularly working in the sector, must be saying, oh, that's not a bad idea. But ultimately, I won't operate the plants. There are people that are more skilled that are doing that job. My job is to be their ally. My job is to be their key interlocutor, that they know they take the phone, they can talk to me and make sure that ultimately we're in solution mode. And that's what I'll do.
Okay, so you have obviously a more domestic focus than under as foreign affairs, and you're not an Albertan, but as a Quebecer, you have some experience with separatism and the concept of unrest and the desire to maybe separate
national
from Canada.
unity, I understand.
We're seeing. How do you view what is happening in Alberta?
Yeah.
And how does your government respond to it? I know Eleanor Roshevsky went into cabinet today, and I know the Prime Minister grew up in Edmonton, and he can't really subcontract national unity. But on the industrial side, Minister Hodgson on the energy and natural resources side, there are moves you can make to sort of ease some of the concerns from Alberta. So how do you approach that in this new portfolio?
So I think first and foremost, what I've learned dealing with the own issues that we're dealing as federal politicians in Quebec is is really understanding what's the issue, sitting down with people, and being able to be in listening mode. That's what I'll do. Second, for sure, I will go to Alberta. For sure, I want to sit down also with the new energy and natural resource ministers that is Tim Hutchins, who's very connected and has a lot of experience in finding capital and being in solution mode, but much more on the business side. Now, for him, it's new to be able to work in the government. And for me, well, I have a lot of experience working in the government. So I think we can work together to send a positive message to the business sector in Alberta. Now, I want to make sure that when we talk to these folks, which are really, really important, that it can go down on the floor of the plants,
so the workers see it and feel it. Of the workers
themselves, that they feel it, that they know that, I think fundamentally it's economic anxiety. It's the fear of losing their job. It's the fear of losing their livelihoods. It's the fear, and their livelihoods and their communities are all linked to basically working a lot in the energy sector. So I want to hear more from them. I want to be able to be in listening mode, but I never take the unity of Canada for granted. I know that Canada always needs to be, a work in progress. I think it's fundamental. I think we should never take each other for granted, but I still think that we're the best country on earth. Having been the foreign minister, I've seen all the different countries, and I think that we can definitely be able to have a positive conversation and be able to find ways to calm that anxiety and ultimately get to a better place, because I know that there's a trust issue. I'm very much aware of that.
Industry Minister Mélanie Joly, thank you for your time and good luck in the new job.
Thank you.
Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney says this new cabinet reflects the change that Canadians voted for.
This cabinet is smaller and more focused than those of previous governments. It will operate with a commitment to true cabinet government, with everyone expected and empowered to show leadership, to bring new ideas, to have a clear focus, and to take decisive actions to accomplish their work. In a return to more traditional cabinet government, our cabinet will be supported by 10 secretaries of state who will lead on key priorities within their ministers' portfolios.
Okay, that's where we're going to begin with the power panel. Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal National Campaign Director. James Moore is a former Conservative Cabinet Minister. Françoise Boivin is a former NDP MP. And Émilie Nicolas is a columnist for Le Devoir. Good to see you all. Michelle, 2 nights in a row. Let's start with you in terms of how what we saw today matched your expectations last night. You said you were looking for women in economic roles. Well, we just talked to Mélanie Joly, who's the Industry Minister. What do you make of the new structure?
Yeah, no, I'm going to give the Prime Minister a solid A. I think it was I think it's a strong cabinet. I acknowledge it's gender parity is there. All of the provinces are represented, including with the secretaries of state. Even the different regions of some of the provinces, like Vancouver Island and the interior of BC, have a secretary of state. So that's all really good. And yes, it was important to see that, that there are women in economic roles as well. It's a good mix of new and old. I'm going to admit I need a cheat sheet for all of the newness in the cabinet, but it's great to see new faces, and it's great to see that new energy kind of coming out of people who might have been there for a while. But clearly, this is a group of people who impressed Mark Carney, in his brief time in politics, throughout his leadership, and then, in the early government that he had. And he doesn't come in with any baggage. He just kind of is coming in with a new outlook and surrounding himself with people that he thinks can deliver on his agenda. So I thought today went really well. Impressed.
James, I don't know if you want to give a letter grade. An A is just an A as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if it needs to be a solid A. But what do you make of this? I mean, it is the gender balanced cabinet that was promised. 14 experienced ministers, 14 new ministers. There is a 28-person core ministry plus the Prime Minister and then 10 secretaries of state who are the privy councillors without the big departments. What do you make of the focus and the structure of what we saw today?
4 ministers from the old regime are holding over in the exact same portfolios that they had. So in terms of newness, I think he sort of hit the mark in saying that this is a new government. It's not a continuation of the Justin Trudeau government. I mean, some of the agenda will hold over, a lot of the personalities will hold over, but only 4 ministers in previous portfolios. So I think that's a sign of change. I think moving Jonathan Wilkinson out and bringing in Tim Hodgson, I think is a welcome piece of news for people who are very much anxious about the energy portfolios and whether or not we were going to be able to move forward on those files, and that matters. But, one of my favorite quotes in politics is a quote by John Quincy Adams, where he said, being all things to all people means being nothing to no one. And when you look at the people who are around the cabinet table there, you see a lot of divergence of views. You see a lot of divergence of opinion, where on the one hand, you'll have Gregor Robertson, when he ran for mayor of Vancouver. He served 3 terms as the mayor of Vancouver. I got to know him very well when I was regional minister. I get along with him personally very well. But when he ran for mayor of Vancouver, he didn't run for the usual things as mayor of Vancouver, like, better trash delivery or pickup and better snow removal and taxes and park management. He ran explicitly for the mayor of Vancouver with a banner on his website being no new tankers, no pipelines in the city of Vancouver. So he's still at the cabinet table in a different portfolio. You still have Stephen Guilbeault at the cabinet table. And then you have Tim Hodgson, who's now taking over as Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. Well, at some point, these forces are going to collide. And then the Prime Minister's commitment to build, baby, build, and to get energy resources to global markets is going to come to a collision point with Stephen Guilbeault and Gregor Robertson, because at some point, someone has to give for the betterment of the country, and we have to get our products to global markets. So that's one thing I'm going to be interested in seeing. Well,
just to let you know, James, Gregor Robertson is on his way here. He's going to join us in a little bit to talk about his new role. But, Françoise, if there is that collision, the Prime Minister is first among equals, right? And I think Mark Carney has made it pretty clear where his biases go in that particular conversation. So how do you think that might play out? And what do you think of the moves we saw for the Prime Minister, sort of his first his cabinet today?
I think he brought in some very interesting people, and the fact that there's a lot of new ones really gives that sense of novelty in some aspect. For myself, I think the collision that is bound to happen at the cabinet table is kind of representative of what Canada is all about. It's representing a diverse type of views on a same topic sometimes. And in that aspect, I do think that, yes, the ultimate arbitrator will be Mark Carney, but he wants to avoid those collisions as much as possible, since he seems to be a guy who wants to achieve things. And it's not very conclusive when all you have is debates and debates and debates. He wants them to be busy. And I think they will, by their mandate that they will receive from the Prime Minister, and everything will start from there. What are your objectives? What's your deadline to achieve them? And while they're busy, Robinson from Vancouver might have a lot on his hand with housing and infrastructure, so he might not have as much time to think about the topics that James was talking about. So everybody will be focused, and I think that's what the Prime Minister wants. If the rest of the caucus stays united, does its job, and there's not as many dramas that we saw in the previous government.
Yeah. Yes, if everybody works at the pace, Emily, the Prime Minister said today he's expecting them, they won't have time to meddle in anyone else's department. They'll be busy with their own. Just, Emily, what's your quick thoughts on what we saw here?
Canadian unity, I think, is the key word here, in the sense that, yes, it comes with a lot of diversity of point of views, but that is the whole point. I also think that it's going to be internal pressure within cabinet, and people are already starting to point out what will be the ideological differences here, which makes sense because the Liberals have absorbed a lot of the vote who wasn't traditionally Liberal. And at the same time, we need to remind ourselves that this is a minority government and that there will need to be some negotiation with other political parties. And so it's going to be coming from basically diplomacy within cabinet, but also if as a minister you're trying to put a bill forward, you will have at some point to try to negotiate things with other parties as well, who are either the NDP or most probably the Bloc as well. And that will come as well with incentives to moderate your own views. And so it's not just the Prime Minister or other members of cabinet. There's also other forces at play within Parliament. And so that's, I think, what I'm going to be watching for. It's that multi-layered diplomacy that's going to be taking place.
James, I just want to come back to you for one quick second before we bring in our next guest. Just on the economic side of things, you mentioned Tim Hudson going into natural resources and energy. Obviously, there's a lot resting on him from an economic perspective. But with what is happening in Alberta, as we talked about last week on the show, with the separation challenges there's a national unity component to what he's being asked to do. So what needs to happen, do you think, with that portfolio in terms of project development and energy expansion and just showing to Alberta they're being heard? Not to put it all on him, but he's the Natural Resources Minister.
Well, I think Premier Smith and even Pierre Poilievre in his campaign platform are quite clear, and so has the energy sector, been very clear about what needs to happen in terms of demonstrating a willingness to advocate on behalf of the industry. First of all, stop punching them, stop punching down at them. The issue of the tanker ban in British Columbia is meaningful and important, and the issue of building capacity to get Canadian products to global markets matters. The importance of not making Canada continue to be at a tax disadvantage relative to our competitors around the world. Canada is operating in a global environment when it comes to our energy products, and we are globally not competitive when it comes to attracting capital, deploying capital, and then rewarding people who take risks in the sector. So I mean, like from stem to stern, the entirety of the sector has been punched up for almost a decade now, and I think Minister Hodgson would do well to travel west, spend a lot of time out west and listening to folks, and then report back to Prime Minister Carney, who said that he wants to build, baby, build, and be a rational prime minister in dealing with these needs, and report back and show some pragmatism that we haven't seen for a very long time.